Welcome back. I have a shorter video for you today. I know in the last lesson we did a lot of stuff. We're gonna kind of take a break with this lesson, but it's really important that I show you this method for finding missing values in a proportion. We've looked at two methods and I'm gonna review them really fast, and then we're gonna talk about something that we've already done and how we can change it a little bit so that we can have one more tool in our toolbox for finding missing values in these proportions. And trust me, as we move through algebra, you'll be glad you know this one, okay? So let's find a missing value using one of the methods we've already used, all right? First of all, let's go to the very beginning. This one right here, I'm missing this value right here, and there's something that I want to go ahead and get us used to doing right away before we move on, and that's instead of using these question marks because they're not very mathematic, let's replace this with an actual variable. Okay? A variable in this case is just a placeholder. It's a letter that we use for a value that we just don't know yet. Okay? And our whole goal here is to find out what it's worth. Okay? So let's move on. Excuse me. There's a factor that gets me from here to here that can also help me get from here to here. Okay? So let's figure out what that factor is. To get from 3 to 9, we know we're getting smaller to bigger, so we're going to multiply by a number. Do you know what it is? It's 3, right? 3 times 3 gets me 9. Good. But since this is a proportion, I know that I have to use that number on the top as well. Okay? Whatever you do to hit the denominator in a ratio, you have to do to the numerator. That's a strict rule. So, can we figure out what the value of x is right now? Sure we can. X turns out to be 2 times 3 is 6. So if I were to rewrite this whole proportion so that it's not missing any values, it would look like this. Ta-da! Good. Let's try another one. Let's go from 2/6 to x to 9. So 2 to 6, proportional, x to 9. And I don't know what x is yet. Excuse me again. Sorry. Okay. Now, I can go ahead and say, can I find a factor on the bottom that will get me from here to here? And I know I'm getting bigger, so I'm gonna have to multiply. The problem is, to get from 6 to 9, I can't think of any whole number factors, so I'd be dealing with like fractions and decimals. I don't wanna do that. So, let's look up and down now. We did this a couple of times when we were doing some of those problem solving. Can I find a factor that will get me from either the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top? You can do it both ways. You could say I can divide 6 by 3 to get 2, and therefore I have to divide 9 by 3 to get whatever x is. Or if you really wanted to, you could say 2 times 3 gives me 6, so what times 3 would give me 9? They're both the same, okay? They're just backwards. Let's go ahead and do the division route so it's easier to see. 6 divided by 3 will give me 2, correct? Okay, so that means I have to use that exact same thing over here. 9 divided by 3 gives me, so what is x? 9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay, so if I want to rewrite this ratio, so it's nice and clean, 2 to 6 is proportional to 3 to 9. Now I did use factors and I used division to show that this is the missing value. Do you remember the last way we checked to make sure that this is actually proportional? It involved crossing, right? So if I cross multiply these guys, 6 times 3 gives me 18, 2 times 9 also gives me 18. And the point I'm showing here is that these two numbers are equal. And whenever I can show that two values are equal after cross multiplying in a proportion, that means those two ratios are equivalent, okay? Now I can use this. This is a powerful tool. Since I'm showing equality here, I can use cross multiplication to find a missing value. Okay? Now, a little further down the road, I'm going to show you a more algebraic way of doing this. But for now, I just want to show you how to use cross multiplication to find a missing value. So I have 2 steps for you. Okay? Step 1 is to find the cross that can happen where you can actually multiply 2 numbers. Okay? Multiply the 2 numbers that you actually can. Okay? If I look this way, can I multiply 4 times x and get a number that I can actually work with? No, I can't. In fact, when we move further into expressions, you're going to see that when I multiply 4 times x, I just get 4x. And that doesn't really help me do any calculations yet, okay? So I'm not going to go cross this way. I want to go cross multiply the 2 that are actually numbers that when I multiply them will give me a number that I can actually work with, okay? So that's step 1. Let's cross multiply 5 times 20. 5 times 20 is 100, and that's a good way to start, okay? 5 times 20 is 100. And remember earlier when I put 18 equals 18? Well, here's 100 equals, and now I'm going to expect 100 to be over here. But let's see how that goes first, okay? I have 100. Now step 2 is to look at any numbers you have left. X doesn't count because I can't really calculate with that. So here's the number that I have left over, and I'm going to divide by that number. That's step 2, okay? And then just calculate the answer. 100 divided by 4 is 25. So by doing these calculations right here, I have just found the value of x. X is 25. So if I rewrite all that so it looks a little prettier, I should have 4/5 is proportional to 20 over 25. And now when I cross multiply, because over here I cross multiplied in the beginning and I got 100, hopefully when I cross multiply this way also, I get 100. And I've kind of already shown that here, just backwards. So 5 times 20 is 100, and that's equal to 4 times 25, which is also 100. So I know that I've done the correct work to find the value of that missing variable. Okay? One more? Let's try one more. Let's go with 4 over 7 equals 2 over x. And I need to find that missing value in the variable x, okay? Now this one I could very easily just look at this and say, what's the factor that I multiply 2 by to get 4? Or I could say, what can I divide 4 by to get 2? But here's the problem with that. If I say 4 divided by 2 is 2, and I have to do the same thing to the bottom of that, that means 7 divided by 2 is going to be some weird number. Okay? Now right away that tells me that x is not going to be a whole number. That's okay. That's fine. But let's not guess. Let's not do any guessing yet. Let's just start off where we were before. 7 times 2 are the two numbers that I can actually cross multiply. Okay? That gives me 14. Next step, divide by what's left. Okay? Now through my amazing powers of long division that we learned, hopefully in like a previous grade, I can set this up and just do the division real quick and find out what x is, okay? 4 goes into 14. 4 times 3 is 12, so that's 3 times. 14 minus 12 is 2. And we're not going to deal with remainders, okay? Remainders were cool because they could actually show you that there was something left over and by how much. But instead of using a remainder, let's use the fraction that's left over, okay? Remember that when you're doing these kinds of long division problems, this remainder right here is the numerator in your new number, and that's the denominator. If you didn't know that, then hopefully you remember that this is the video you learned that in because it's a good skill to have. You won't use it too often, but it's a good skill to have, okay? And then of course, 2 to 4, 3 and 2/4 is easily simplified to 3.5. Okay, so x in this case has a value of 3.5. Okay? So that's another method for finding missing values in a proportion. If you're missing a value here, now you have 3 different tools in your toolbox. You can either look for a factor that's the same on the top and the bottom, or you can look for a factor that's the same up and down for both ratios, or you can cross multiply, start with the 2 numbers that you can actually multiply, and then divide by the number that's left, and that will give you the value of x. Okay? I'm gonna give you some practice that I actually didn't make. Thank goodness I got permission from another site to share his worksheets. So if you look right underneath this video, you'll find plenty of practice for this kind of stuff, as well as an answer sheet below it, okay? If you need help with any of those things, look me up for tutoring or join me on the Facebook group once a week. Keep looking for me to announce those things and we'll get you taken care of. All right?